adoption of the United Nations 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals in January 2016, we entered a period where the world's nations committed to ending global poverty, protecting our planet, and promoting a life of dignity for all. The role of business was cited as quintessentially key in achieving these goals. The 2030 Agenda is a wake-up call and offers a new benchmark for the business of tomorrow. Supply chain sustainability will be critical in making the global goals part of local business so that the extension of a company's operations, products and services can support the realities of our planet and better serve markets both today and in the future. Uganda is considered one of the most beautiful countries in the African continent because of its diverse ecosystems that include natural forests, savanna woodlands, wetlands, lakes and rivers. Early European explorers branded it the Pearl of Africa. Much of Uganda lies on the African plateau between 900 to 1,500 meters above sea level. Its tropical highland forests are divided in three distinct geographical zones characterized by rainfall regimes: the eastern rim of the Western Rift Valley in the west, the broad belt around the northwestern shores of Lake Victoria, and the spectacular mountains in the east. But now, the country's rich natural heritage is under severe threat due to a massive loss in forest cover, a loss that has increased at a very high rate in recent years. In the past century, Uganda's forests have been under severe pressure mainly from the expansion of agricultural land as a result of a growing population, increasing demand for charcoal and fuel, unchecked logging and weak legal protections, and even weaker enforcement of the forest protection laws. According to the country's 2012 National State of the Environmental Report, Uganda's forest area is being lost at a rate of 1.8% per year. In total, between 1990 and 2010, Uganda lost 31% of its forest cover, a decline from 5 million hectares to 3.6 million hectares. Back in 2007, the Ugandan government announced plans to delist 1/3 of Mabira forest from its protected status and give it away to a private corporation for sugarcane plantations and biofuel processing. The plan was opposed by environmentalists concerned about its impact on endangered species and local water resources, among other things, as well as by human rights activists concerned about the damage of livelihoods of local people. Opposition to the project led to riots and the death of 3 people, and the project has since been suspended. Right now, here at NTV, in conjunction with EcoTrust Uganda, we embark on a salient discussion on the role of forests in sustainable supply chains and how the attitudinal alteration in the manner of how companies run their businesses can save the future of our environment. We are on all our digital platforms, online and VDT app. You are welcome. Thanks our viewers for joining us. I'm Karaga Baldwins and we're coming to you live from the Kampala Sena International Conference Center. And today, just as the introduction has been, we're going to delve into this very salient matter of concern about the sustainability of our forests and of course how businesses need to be responsible in that regard. And just straight on set to make sure that we have a discussion in this panorama of this problem, I have a very resplendent panel on my set. Right at my very left, I have Mrs. Pauline N. Kalunda, and she's the Executive Director, EcoTrust Uganda. Pauline, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes, nice to meet you. We're going to have a further hearing of your voice. And in the middle, I have Mr. Kamese Geoffrey. He's the Senior Program Officer, Energy, Climate Change and Chemicals Management at National Association for Professional Environmentalists. It's abbreviated as NAPE. Mr. Geoffrey, welcome.
Thank you and good evening, viewers.
Yes, and at the extreme end, I have Stuart Mani Raguha, the National Forestry Authority Range Manager, Budongo Systems Range. That name is pretty indeed unique. You're welcome, Stuart.
Thank you so much. Good evening, viewers.
All right. So let's go straight into this with the introduction that Ruzon said. We are glad for you being a partner in this particular discussion, Pauline. We need you to first help us understand what EcoTrust is and actually what we're trying to achieve, and especially with this discussion.
Thank you very much, Baldwins, and good evening, viewers. We are glad that we are having this partnership with NTV to be able to speak with the rest of the Ugandans about the importance of the work that we do at EcoTrust. EcoTrust is an environmental trust. All our efforts are towards incentivizing the adoption of sustainable practices. We work with private sector, with local communities, with donor communities, and with the local, with the community-based organizations and NGOs. And we at EcoTrust, we believe that natural resources are an international public good, and that for everybody to be able to participate in them, everybody must also make a contribution. But it's a very amorphous resource that is not always tangible, and also the dynamics within it are very complex, that they're not easy to understand. So what we do as EcoTrust, we are a team of experts that try to understand the complex systems, but also identify the potential contribution of every actor and the opportunities that exist, and then we build partnerships. We build partnerships between private sector and local communities, donor communities and local communities, government agencies, and all the actors on the ground, for everybody to put their contribution on the table, but also for everybody to be rewarded for the contribution that they make.
Is it locally founded and located?
Yeah, it's a very exciting, unique, but indigenous organization. It's a national organization. And some of the programs that we have, the leading global in that field, but it's a Ugandan organization. The board is full of Ugandans, and all the staff are Ugandan. And then we work with the local communities as partners. So all the things that we do are indigenous.
Oh, great, because usually most of those tremendous works seem to be of foreign nature. But great, and we're going to proceed on understanding the substance of this discussion. And Geoffrey, the aspect of sustainable business or sustainable even development goals, these are more of academic words. We need you to help us, of course, in the context of this discussion, to understand this major issue, the two aspects, the climate change and sustainable supply chain. It's a whole field of studies, sustainable supply chains, but just help us break down this, and just to help us how it is related to the forestry area, all those two particular concepts. Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the realities of today is that the climate is indeed changing, and globally it has been noted that the temperatures have increased by about 1.5 degrees Celsius, and that is an enormous increase which really will affect us. Now, climate change is the change in weather over a long period of time. There are two concepts. There is climate change and there is climate variability. Climate change takes a long time. It is studied over a long period of time. And climate variability is any time changes occur in the weather patterns. But it has been indeed noted that the global climate change is changing. Global climate is changing, and what is causing this is our human activities, which is really something that we must address as human beings, because our survival depends on a good climate, and if the climate is not good, we are bound to fail in all that we are doing. Now, when we talk about climate change, we are talking about aspects that are very extreme at times. We are talking about, it could be extreme drought, which could lead to people dying because of lack of water, lack of food. Like we have had people dying in some parts of Uganda, like in Karamoja, because of drought. It could be extreme rainfall, like we have had people dying in Kisoro, people being swept in areas that have never experienced flooding. It could be a lot of other disasters, winds. In other countries, you have heard of cyclones sweeping off villages, sweeping off towns. And that is what we are talking about in terms of climate change happening. When we are talking about sustainable supply chains, we are talking about responsible production. We are talking about the different actors doing things in a more responsible manner, a manner that can help us, in a way, avoid some of the catastrophes arising from the climate, negative climate impacts. And to me, this is very important because we are talking about people producing. We cannot go on without production. But what is very important here is how do you produce? And when you produce, what is your impact on the environment? The other aspect that we are talking about is responsibility, being able to be self-regulating, not always being policed. So to me, there are several things that we are talking about when we are talking about sustainable supply chains. When you are talking about forest, for example, you are talking about people being able to interact in a more sustainable manner with our forest resources. How are you, when you are talking about development, is it a sweep all? Do you have to come and clear every living thing for you to develop? Or is it for you to be able to first identify those very key ecosystems that must be conserved for our own benefit today, but also for the future generations? And this is very important when we are talking about sustainable supply chains.
Okay.
So, yes.
All right. So actually, the supply chain is the realm in which a business operates to source and also to supply as in itself. And so the forests are a key natural phenomenon that we need to make sure that we take into a balanced usage. And now, with Stuart, you work with the forest. I can see your title is National Forestry Authority Range Manager Budongo Systems. You need actually to explain this a little bit. It's been stated, and even in the introduction when I was making that narrative, Uganda's forest area is being lost at a rate of 1.8% per year. And between 1990 and 2010, Uganda lost 31% of its forest cover. So we need, you're representing National Forestry Authority. We need to understand where is the source of this problem of forest degradation, of why is this happening, and of course helping me also to understand what range manager Budongo Systems range mean, and then we proceed.
Thank you so much, Baldwin. Well, National Forestry Authority manages central forest reserves in this country, and in a bid to do that, they have structured it into management units. And these management units are looking at some areas. So when we talk about Budongo Systems, this is the Bunyoro sub-region. So I am managing central forest reserves within the Bunyoro sub-region under National Forestry Authority. That is what that one means.
All right.
Yes, I think it is not news anymore, as we even saw in the intro. The forest cover of this country has continued to reduce. Looking at the land cover statistic, we are seeing from 1990 actually up to 2015, we lost about 3.1 million hectares.
Oh,
however, it is very important to look at where the bigger problem is, such that we are able to concentrate the efforts or distribute our efforts equally. The management of the entire forests in this country, I would categorize them into two aspects. Those forests that are under protected area management, these are under National Forestry Authority, wildlife, and then those other forests that are under private ownership. So at the 1990 baseline statistic, we had 4.9 million hectares of of the forests, or the forest cover. Now of this, those that are under protected areas were about 1.4 million, and then the 3.4 million was on the privately owned land. And that is what explains what some of us are familiar with, the 30% protected area, then the 70% under private forest management. Now the problem now, when you get to the 2015 statistic, you realize that the 3.1 million loss is actually much more on the privately owned forests. Actually about 3.4 million hectares of the forest has been lost in that aspect.
So more of the private ownership realm is actually losing the forest cover. And you imply that the one which is under public or government supervision is not being lost?
Well, there is a loss, but the biggest loss has been cited on the privately owned forests. What Geoffrey was talking about is when we go into these land use activities, agriculture and whatever, there is a shift.
Charcoal burning,
clearing of the forests here and there. And this has been seen more on privately owned land. However, that does not save the forest and the protected forest either. So as the forests reduce on the private, the pressure now is put on the managed forests, the protected areas. Because we very well know that over 97% of all of us in this country are depending on biomass as a firewood. So if it is depleted outside, where else do we run to? So these are the protected areas. And that now describes the bigger problem.
Absolutely. And we're going to try to get maybe solutions and how deep the problem is and how we can be able to, just after a break, I'm actually coming back to you to understand how Uganda is working, especially, of course, directly EcoTrust with the international community to make sure that we be able to alleviate this whole problem. And thanks our viewers. Go on Facebook. I'm going to cite out some of your posts and the discussion that is online to make sure that we feed it into this on-set discussion. We'll be back just after this break.
Uganda. Its economy is growing and people's lives are improving. But this progress is already impacted by the effects of climate change.
If you speak about destruction of infrastructure, if you speak about destruction of crops, if you speak about destruction of roads, of housing, the people affected, the victims, it's huge. It's a huge loss to the economy.
From the streets of Kampala to the hills of Mount Elgon and the banks of the Mpanga River, unpredictable weather events such as droughts, floods, and landslides are already threatening this country's ecosystems and livelihoods. Uganda's population is rapidly increasing.
Water consumption, fuel wood burning, forests disappearing, all resources are being impacted on.
Uganda's economy is heavily dependent on our natural resource base. These resources are under threat from the impacts of climate change.
And thanks our viewers for keeping with us online on Facebook. Of course, I'm Kaga Baldwins and we're coming to you from NTV. We've posted a question on Facebook and we're asking, what are the economic consequences of deforestation? And Apollo Victor says, drought, soil erosion, loss of fertility in the soil, destruction of wild animals. And then Salamander says, it leads to raping of Article 1. Okay, that's pretty. Then Asante Eddie says, there are many only that our control bodies are so dominant, like National Forest Authority, dormant rather. I think, Stuart, you were hearing that kind of response. Thanks for making an interaction on our online platform, and we're continuing to have this discussion on set. I have a very resplendent team of environmentalists, and let me just get straight to Pauline, who is the MD of EcoTrust Uganda. So, Pauline, we just need to understand what is the international effort, especially, of course, in conjunction with Uganda, as EcoTrust is in the middle of all this, efforts underway to ensure that we can be able to regress this whole problem that is happening of our forests getting depleted?
At international level, there are very many processes that have been happening for a very long time. And at the international community, mainly, these processes are drafted into what they call conventions. There is a convention on combating climate change. There is a convention on conservation of biological diversity, on deforestation, on all sorts of things. And most of the times, these conventions are derived from the understanding that natural resources such as forests are international public goods. For example, a forest that is in the Budongo system, when the trees are growing, if you remember the story of photosynthesis, they absorb carbon dioxide from the air. And when they absorb that carbon dioxide from the air, they regulate the climate that he's talking about. The same impact they have on the climate in Uganda is also translated into the climate they have in the United States, for example. But also the same way when a plane is flown in Europe and carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere, when the climate changes, even in Uganda, we will be affected. So there are mechanisms that have been put in place to make sure that the contributors to these processes contribute to cleaning up or reduce their impact. But also, when a farmer in Uganda grows trees that absorb the carbon dioxide in the air, mechanisms have been put in place to quantify that service and put a value to it such that the farmer can be paid or rewarded for that service. Yes, yes, that's the carbon. Working? It is working, and as EcoTrust, we are running a scheme, a carbon sequestration scheme, in which we mobilize smallholder farmers to increase tree cover on their land. Because when Stuart was talking about forest loss, he talked about the majority of forest loss has been converting to agriculture. But what people don't understand is that forests and wetlands are actually responsible for the water that is even in the soils and even in the fertility in the soils. So if you remove all the wetlands and you remove all the soils from agricultural landscapes, they will become depleted nutrients, but also they will lose their ability to retain water. So the farmers need the trees for their own productivity. So they are rewarded by having trees on their land. They are rewarded by having higher yields. But as EcoTrust, we have a mechanism through which we can quantify the amount of carbon dioxide that is stored on your land as a result of keeping those trees on your land. And if you sold that carbon dioxide, or if you went onto the global market to access that financing as an individual farmer, it's prohibitive because you have only a few tons that you store. So what we do is we have this scheme that we call Trees for Global Benefit, because the trees that you put on your land provide an international public good, which is climate regulation. So we quantify the carbon that is stored in your trees, in my trees, in his trees, in his trees, and put it together into a cooperative offsetting scheme, and we help you access the international market. Yes, we do it.
So somebody would actually get money for having trees on
exactly.
their private land.
Exactly.
So are you inviting the public to come?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, we are currently operational in the Rwenzori Mountains, in the Rift Valley area, in the Hoima Masindi area, and Mount Elgon. They are in, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's a very complex process that is highly technical. So we undertake quite a number of studies to be able to extend into an area. But yes, we've been moving slowly but surely, and our hope is that we will cover the whole country some point in time. So those are the incentive mechanisms that I spoke about.
Just 30 seconds. It was the apparent international arrangement with climate change. I think you're pretty aware that the US has pulled out of the of the Cooperation of Parties from the Paris Agreement, and literally the world is somehow shady and quite, shaken up with that. And that's why I'm asking, is really that climate...
Yeah, there are some value chains that understand that their own sustainability depends upon the existence of trees in the landscapes. So there is a private sector that doesn't really care whether the US is in or out. They know that their own survival, such as coffee growers, cocoa growers, they know that their own survival, the survival of their own value chains, depends on the presence of trees. So we are linking Ugandan farmers into that market, which is called the voluntary market, whereby for the sustainability or for the survival of their own value chains, they estimate or they quantify how much carbon dioxide they contribute to the atmosphere as a result of their activities, and then turn that into dollars and bring it back into the ecosystem where their supply comes from, their raw materials come from, and use it to incentivize farmers to grow trees that will keep trees in those supply chains. So that is what we are talking about, that businesses need to engage with value chain actors for their own survival. Not so much because the laws say so or the conventions say so or this country is in or is out, but for their own survival as a supply chain, they need to be engaged with the actors and conserve the environment.
Okay, brilliant. At least there's still hope. Now, Geoffrey, straight, you're saying that the businesses need to be involved. How exactly are you involving them? And to a great degree, actually, it's not the real corporate setup businesses. It's the informal sector. It's just the individual who seeks to survive that takes down these trees and deforestates the land. How do you effectively get to engage the public and especially the business sector to be conscious of this problem?
Yeah, I think over the years we have had a kind of ping-pong relationship with the business community. And as civil society, we are beginning to realize that we cannot do it ourselves. We need to involve business. We need to involve the different small stakeholders that we're talking about in the whole of this conservation process. And what we have so far started doing is to bring closer the business community, to engage them, to make them understand the need for them to be sustainable in their production processes, and even for the communities to understand why they need to conserve and how they can do it. Of course, there are still some challenges, but we have already started an initiative. We have had some meetings where we have engaged the business community to come on board in the conservation processes. Of course, building confidence is not an easy thing. It is a process. And that process of confidence building is ongoing.
So you're building that as under what context? As you're part of the National Association of Professional Environmentalists. Is that how you are going to the public and getting them recruited into this whole arrangement, or with National Forestry Authority? It
goes beyond. We have formed networks. Of course, NAPE, Eco Trust, and other organizations are in all this. And one of the things is to make sure that we work with some of these stakeholders. Of course, not everyone will respond immediately. It is a process, as I said. In a nutshell, I'm saying that we have initiated it not as NAPE alone. It is different stakeholders that are coming together to engage companies, to engage different businesses, to make sure that they also become very active in these schemes, so that we don't keep saying they are on the wrong side. But we can also be part of, they can also be part of the conservation.
So it's just an advocacy task that you have?
Yeah, it is an advocacy task. We are taking it forward. Of course, as I have already said, like today I went to a certain company and they said, yes, you are telling us, how are you helping us to improve The challenge is that they are not yet admitting that we can work together to improve their production systems. We can work together to conserve or to sustainably utilize our environment. It is a journey that we have started and a journey that we shall maybe accomplish together.
Okay, thanks, Geoffrey. Stuart, so how the complaint, as you have really narrated the challenge to be more on the private-owned land space that is depleting these forests. So how do you bring, especially people of the informal nature, people who are surviving on trees for their own livelihood? Okay, someone cuts down the tree for lumber, for wood, for whatever cause. How do you bring them on board to make sure that we can redeem this land from this deforestation?
Well, maybe to start, I would want to make clarification that NFA is not dormant.
Yeah, that was a public comment.
It's a public comment, but
and I need you to go back on our NTV page and see the litany of comments that have been made. Yes.
Yeah, we have made a lot of progress in executing our mandate of managing 506 central forest reserves within this country. But as you realize from the statistics, it's something that has to go outside the central forest reserves that we are managing. And in a bid to do this, actually NFA makes available between 6 million to 10 million seedlings annually that are given free to the public. Individuals, institutions, churches, schools, private individuals who are planting, to ensure that whoever has an area where they can plant trees, they would basically do that. And that is one of the strategies we are trying to bring on board everyone to increase the forest cover outside the forest reserves with the hope to reduce pressure on the central forest reserves. We definitely not only focus on that. As we give out this, we are also cautious about our side of the mandate, and we are doing activities like restoration. I think people have gone to Mabila of late, can attest to this, that the forest is becoming much more dense than before. All of this is not coming because there is no work being done. There is some work being done, though the problem is much bigger, and therefore calls upon everyone to actively participate and contribute towards the increase in the forest cover in the country. You can see some of other steps being taken. We are looking at strengthening partnerships. All of these individuals who are interested, who are coming closer to us, corporate bodies have come on board and worked with us in restoring some of the forest reserves. Civil society organizations also being brought on board. So our main focus of having everyone included is in bringing a sense of building partnerships so that everyone's contribution is collectively added on, and then progressively we can have an increase in the forest cover in the country.
Okay, and on that note, I'm going to take a break, then we come back. I'm going to invite actually the public to call in. Thanks our viewers for keeping with us here at NTV as we're discussing this particular problematic issue of our land deforestation in Uganda. So when we come back, I'm going to request you to call in just about 3 calls, and then I'll also make citation of your comments on Facebook. We'll be back shortly.
And you access the cinema can allow to America, allow to London, allow to Tayi, allow to Choroninitunga. No, the work is just within us. So we have to base on what we have, the resources that we have, to ensure that it will bring income in us. So on it is okay, iku mama ilango icholin, imu gwere ngunu kere, abang ser na ikito, abang ser dara oka lupot, abang sani moni mambi chwe boka kwa, abang sine jechu akopi kodi ya na icho na misirikon, ikate kata kere kileng, kileng era ilu kumini na dukuminikan, wele kileng ngon, kate kileng ngon, ogete moni kina kone misirise. So ekos ya sanya nguni tolo moni eba, eko ya, lingara kine dara oka lupoto, lingara kina ngoni tolo moni nyamada.
I'm Karaga Borwins. We're coming to you from the Kampala International Conference Center, and we're talking about how we can sustain our environment with, of course, business being responsible in how we treat our environment, especially the trees. And on Facebook, we posted another question, and on Twitter, what should the public do to support the efforts of safeguarding and improving Uganda's forest cover? And John Kalyesubula says that we need to defend the Constitution. Okay, this is quite... we need to introduce more simple and substantive means of fuel innovation. Then Habib, he says, encourage afforestation and sensitized general public on benefits of having and safeguarding forests. Then lastly, Prince Kenneth Kama Shiba, she asked that we should stop charcoal burning. And continue within this discussion online, and I will also request that you call in just 3 phone calls to make sure that we engage with our panel here on set that is discussing this matter. Pauline, you had an annual event. You were having a recap on what you've done and what you need to accomplish, a stakeholders annual meeting. That was on Friday, 22nd September. What was it about? Still in context of this, but also what have you achieved substantively as an agency that is trying to intervene in this problem? Okay.
As I mentioned earlier on, we are an indigenous organization. We are owned by Ugandans. So on an annual basis, we invite different stakeholders and report back to them how far we've come. And this year's celebrations were under the theme Shared Resources, Joint Solutions. Celebrating the partnership that we have with NAPE, with IUCN, with forest government agencies such as NFA. And so far, we celebrated the 1 millionth ton of carbon dioxide.
Oh, about
that
the
has
carbon
been, exactly.
You're really serious about it.
Exactly. We've been able to quantify or provide evidence that the farmers we work with have so far stored 1 million tons of carbon dioxide on their land.
Any monetary quantification of that?
Yes.
How much?
It depends, but they've been able to access the market. We've been doing this since 2003, but they're able to rake in about $1 million every year collectively.
Wow.
as a scheme.
That's a tremendous amount of money.
And
about
this
3 billion Ugandan
exactly, and this is as foreign direct investment into smallholder agroforestry. I mean, it's their money. We support them to access the market as a reward for storing, we call it for increasing carbon stocks on their farm. And we've been able to do this in 4 different landscapes, in Mount Elgon, Rwenzori, the Rift Valley area, and the other side of the Albertine Rift where the oil is. So those are basically the things that we were celebrating. It has about 6,000 farmers participating, and there are very many other things that are associated with this. They do it as a business. They farm as a business. They are trained to farm trees as a business, but also they can use their agreements they have with the organization as collateral to access loans. So it's a wall. Like I said, we support private sector, mainly in Europe and the US, to engage with their value chain actors in the supply chain in Uganda, but in a manner that rewards and is mutually beneficial to both parties.
How does the public get in touch with you, or you're exclusive? You only people come to your office by invitation?
No, we are. If I said we are exclusive in that we deal with the smallholder farmer, the base of the pyramid, the people that do not have what it takes to understand how these mechanisms work, the people that they can't even access loans from the bank because they don't even have land titles. So we work with those communities, and we work out means within which we can put value to what they have and access the most lucrative of markets. So we are exclusive in that we are exclusive to the base of the pyramid. So people like you with with quite a bit of land, you wouldn't benefit. But we are trying to see if we can work with actors such as the National Forest Authority to see if we can have additional schemes that can be accessed by the other actors, because where you get 10 or 100 farmers maybe managing 100 hectares, if you worked with the kind of stakeholders that NFA works with, that would be one player. So in terms of conservation or in terms of increasing tree cover, you would gain a lot more. But in terms of the core benefits, such as livelihood improvement and so on and so forth, this base of the pyramid that is really neglected by everybody is in more dire straits.
Okay.
And I think that's why you don't know about us, because we work with the poorest of the poor.
I need the public to know about you. So
the people with whom we don't, I mean, the people with whom you wouldn't get so much, you know, known. There is no hype about them.
No worries, at least now we know you. A phone call is going, if a phone line is going to run down here, your screen, please call in. Just need 3 calls first. Yes, Geoffrey. Now, of course, forest products usage is one of the topmost sources of economic livelihood in Uganda. I mean, you keep on repeating this, so we need to understand how these economic activities are supported. Is there a way we can bring in regulation, a certain kind of oversight over these particular practices? Because time and again, there's a claim that charcoal burning is being intervened in, that there's policing on, but it doesn't seem to work. And as long as people simply need a livelihood, a basic livelihood, you will find that deforestation will continue. How do we make sure that this is really sorted?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we have is solving a problem by creating a crisis. You cannot tell people not to cut trees for cooking when you have not given them an option. And I think if we are going to help our communities participate in conservation, we need to come up with real workable solutions. And one of them is, for example, we have energy. Is the energy that we are producing going to help the common man to have his energy challenges addressed? But if we are producing energy that will not benefit the local man, we are indeed saying that the local man should continue to cut the forest. But we should also realize that the forests have got a limit. Even if the NFA has got some of its forest estate that has not been utilized, or that they are still protecting, when the forests on the private land get finished, definitely they will invade the forests. So the best we can do for our people is to give them alternatives. We should also realize that
which alternative? You are a forest environmentalist.
Yeah, I think we should talk of clean energy. Energy, like we are generating, we are going to generate so many megawatts in Karuma. Where is it going to go? And I think, to me, if we are to conserve our environment, if we are to conserve our forests, the energy that we are going to generate, let the people utilize it. And the other challenge we have also realized is that we have not empowered our local governments to participate in energy generation, to participate in energy, planning for energy for the local people. And I think, to me, this is very important, that the local leadership should also be able to know what energy is available and how they meet the energy for the communities, instead of us looking at government to provide everything. We must realize that one of the biggest stores of carbon is a tree. And science tells us that energy, you read this, they looked like poems when we were still in school, that energy is neither destroyed, neither created. It just changes form. So when you destroy a tree, you have not destroyed it. You have changed the form of energy that the tree was storing. And eventually it comes back. And recently there is a study that has indicated that some of the forests that we have, instead of generating a lot of oxygen, they are generating a lot of carbon. Because a lot of the trees have been destroyed, they have been cut, they are rotting, and in the process of rotting, they are emitting carbon. So to me, I think we should not look at these forests and say our people still need natural resources or need these forests for their energy. We should also realize that at a certain point in time, these forests will be no more. And when they are no more, what shall we talk about? Shall we still continue saying that our people need natural resources for their livelihoods? I think we need to think and do what we need to do in order to kind of stop a catastrophe ahead of us.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Stuart, so what is the, just as we're wrapping up, what is the climate future? Okay, and we're going to have calls, I think, pretty soon. Okay, I have a caller online. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is Bob in Kampala.
Yes, Bob.
And my concern is about trees in Kampala.
All right.
There are a lot of trees in Kampala which are mutilated.
Okay, that's a gross one.
The trees in Kampala have become ornamental, even in places where there are no live wires. You see? So I'm suggesting that despite the many articles and, that have been written, maybe EcoTrust can try and engage City Council to make sure that these trees are pruned. They need to be pruned maybe every quarter of the year. We should give notice on a Sunday and we prune the trees so that in places like between Crested Towers and Serena, there are some trees there which are being mutilated. If you go to Total in Zambia, where the carpenters work, there are trees which should be useful as a shade, but instead they are ornamental.
All right.
In fact, one should be able to walk from Zambia to Gava, or from Nakawa to Port Bell under shade.
Okay, thank you indeed.
Council don't care.
Yeah, absolutely. Point well taken. Pauline, how do you manage forests in the city? Yep. All right. I have another caller. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is Michael Manto from Sotera.
Nice to hear you, Michael. What's your comment or question?
It's like, our life will try to fight deforestation when people in the villages are put together. There is no way we can conserve our forest. When people in the villages are put no power in their houses.
All right.
The government supplies electricity, all houses in villages. But one thing I was in Kenya, all the small houses are put people in their roof.
Okay.
But here, the big hotels, the so-called fight start, when you take there, where they cook crops, they use charcoal, they use firewood. How are you going to conserve the forest? When all the hotels are using firewood.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, thank you, Michael. So the point is that the government needs to provide or subsidize power provision, especially for people in the rural areas. Just one last caller because of the constraint in time. Hello? Okay, I'll just wait for one more call. So you can hear these particular sentiments and the issues being raised. Now, Stuart, I was asking about the climate future, but now you're hearing also other concerns being raised. There is no way you're going to encourage the rural poor, and even just here in the urban area, I can tell you, a sack I think of charcoal right now is just inquiring. It's about 80,000, which is incredibly pricey. So what is the future in this regard? Our forests really going to be rescued?
Well, let me pick from where my colleague stopped. When the last tree is cut, what shall we do? I think it's a matter that we must look at very seriously, because when the last tree falls, I think a human life will be impossible. Because we all know from basic science that trees are life-supporting instruments to humanity. They are giving us oxygen for us to breathe. So if there are no more, I think we shall be no more. And therefore, we must build on that to ensure that actually the trees are much more multiplied than cut. However, I share similar concern with him. I think however much we may regret cutting of trees, there must be a deliberate effort to provide alternative energy sources which must be available, affordable, and accessible.
Yeah, actually the last caller is proposing that the government should provide free electricity, which at times is debatable, at least subsidized substantially, yes.
Very importantly, because...
Yeah, just last minute, so that
we are all relying on fuel wood, as you said, charcoal. In Kampala is about 90,000 a bag. Where is all this charcoal coming from? Have we all bothered to go back? Even the districts that are clearing this charcoal, are they looking at the sustainability? All of the trees are being cleared. What are they doing to replace? I think it's a very big concern that we might need to change our thinking about. We need the charcoal. We have to cut trees and burn the charcoal. But for how long shall we do this? There must be a shift.
Okay. Just thank you. Pauline, just on that last question, that's the first question that we had, urban tree management, and just a wrap-up note. 1 minute. And then
I think on urban tree management, I think I just want to give a general a general response in that trees should be planted with a management objective. And the silviculture practices that you have, or the tree management practices, should correspond with the management objective. And yes, the trees in Kampala are supposed to be for shade, for windbreakers, and so on and so forth. And he's right in saying they should therefore be pruned and managed to be able to provide that service that they are meant for. My last take to the viewers is that these are shared resources that require joint solutions. I don't know. These days I find charcoal more expensive than gas, because when I buy gas at about 110,000, I use that gas for 5 months. But the charcoal for 90,000, I use it for 1 month, meaning that actually charcoal is more expensive than gas. But people need to understand and do the mathematics. Every time you cut a tree or eradicate trees or even wetlands from Kampala, you're increasing the cost of treating water. And National Water is going to transfer that cost to you. So you're thinking that you're cutting a tree, you're stealing resources from other people, but actually you're harming your own self. If people could sit down and do the mathematics, they will actually understand that these are international public goods, they are shared resources, but you actually share the cost. You think it's the tragedy of public goods, and therefore you're not paying, but you pay. In the end, you pay in form of paying for the cost of water, or the cost of fuel wood, or whatever it is, or actually the cost of food, because if it becomes more expensive to grow food, you will pay. So in the end, we are not running away from it. We are only harming our own selves.
Okay, pretty sad peril that we're in. But Pauline, Kalunda, Mr. Kamesek Geoffrey, and Stuart Mani Raguha. That is a
you got it. You got it eventually.
Yes, it's been a wonderful indeed time with you, and I believe this has been a substantive engagement and discussion. Please, thank you for coming on set.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to have you again.
Thank you. We too.
Thanks our viewers for keeping with us, for watching us here on set online, and for engaging with us. And thanks for keeping us as your #1 station. And I need to urge, if you're out there as a company, as a ministry or a government agency or department, please come, talk to us, talk to our MD, talk to myself and our marketing team, and we will have a comprehensive discussion. Thanks to my marketing team, to my producer and studio director. Please keep NTV as your #1 station as you have always. God bless you. I'm Karaga Boris.